Next thing we do, we're going to tighten up the nut for the lay shaft. These are used, but a little tip, I'm going to put a new one on, but a little tip, that if you haven't got a new nut, you can actually use the old one by just taking a little shaving off the face, and it will then allow the nut to turn a little bit more. Because if you can see on here, this is where I punched it over before, but if you take a little shaving off the face here on the grinder and do it parallel, then this will allow it to go into a different position. Let me show you. Now, you're not supposed to cut on the side of a grinder. Sometimes you have to. Naturally this will start to get warm. So I shaved a little bit off there. It's nice and parallel. We're going to give it a clean and we're going to try it and see if the holes, if the notches here have moved round. So I've set the torque wrench to 200 Newton meters. Well, it's about 210 Newton meters. It's a bit flexible, 210, 240, as long as this nut is tight. So what I'm going to do is put some rag in here and let it turn, and we'll see if we can click this off. It's going to be tight. Oh, dear me. That is super tight. Oh. Wait a minute, I'll have to come back to this. So after giving myself a hernia, trying to get that nut tight, it is tight, it has to be monster tight. Now we can take the rag out of the gear, that will allow them to turn. But importantly, when I did that little trick about shaving down the face of the nut, you can see where the old stalking was here, but now it's moved. This is the place where it needs to be stalked over, just here. So we're not in the same place anymore. So we can actually use that nut again. That will save you like 50p. But anyway, so now we're going to stalk over the nut. And what we need to do is find a block of wood to support under here to take the weight. We have to put a block under here. And when we stalk this, because if we start hitting it with a hammer, we can damage the bearings, and we don't want to do that after all the trouble we've been through. Let's find a block of wood. So we're going to use a little rounded punch. This is one I've got special for doing this, and it has to be smaller than the notch that it's going into, otherwise it'll all jam up. So I've got it supported on a couple of blocks of wood, and then, hope you can see it, knock it over, turn it 180 degrees, because there's two on the block. And there you go. Let's see if we can zoom in on that. There you can see where I've pinned it over. You see the bottom one and the top one, and it's not in line with the old one, so that's going to be working out really nice. So the next thing, we're going to build up the gears on the end for the fifth gear. Synchro ring on, and now this is going to be somewhat tricky because we're going to have to push this on using a special tool as usual, but we mustn't forget to line up these slippers into the notch of here. So we've got to be really careful when we do this. And again, it's not advisable to start hammering these things on, because what will happen is you can damage the bearings. So if you're sort of giving it this big licks with a hammer, you'll probably damage something. So we're going to put a tool on, which is this thing. We're going to push them on with this tool. Now I think I might have to set this up, I'm not sure. Is it going to go? Yeah, it'll go onto that thread. So this is the tool to push the bearings on. Push all this lot back together. Which, as you can understand, why I didn't really want to... I put the hose clip round so we didn't have to assemble this and disassemble it if we made a mistake. So I'm just going to reach for some spanners and we're going to put this on. So I've set up the tool. This is a proper Land Rover tool for putting these pieces on. They weld a little bit of a shaft on here so you can grab hold of it while you're turning it, but sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle, so I use one of these as an extension bar, and this is your jack handle out of your toolkit. Must be a Land Rover tool because it fits beautifully over there. So what we do is we progressively tighten that on, just slowly, gently, bently. There we go. And by not using a power tool, we have a little bit more control for the speed that this is going to attach to the shaft, which is really important because, like I say, I'm looking at this all the time to see what the clearances are. And so far so good. When it gets closer, we're going to stop and just move that synchro ring. That's about there. Just let's see if we can move that forward so it engages in the teeth. There we go. That's that. Happy with that. You have to be delicate because we don't want it to fall off. And this will tighten down until it's on its shoulder. There. Give it a nip down, back it off. There we go. And extract the tool, if it will. There we go. So you've often wondered why there's a thread on the end of here. Well, it's not only to use this tool, which, ironically, was made in Hungary, of all places. These LT77 gearboxes went in a wide variety of vehicles. The LT, by the way, stands for Leyland transmission, if anybody's asking. But these used to go in MGs and I don't know, all Triumphs and all sorts of cars. But if it didn't need a transfer case on, they used to put a different housing on the back, and this is where your dry shaft flange went on for your prop shaft with the nut. So they were sort of trying to be a bit economical by using the same box but just making different adapters for the back. And there was different shifter adapters too. You know, where the bit that goes on top of here, the housing. Oh, in fact, this bit here, look. This piece. Oh, I've got gaskets everywhere now. See this piece? Oh, there you go. There was about 3 or 4 different designs of these for different cars. So they're trying to use as much stuff as we could. So the next thing is we've got to put the spacer on here and then the circlip. So once you've pushed your synchro hub on, there's a washer that goes behind here, a spacer, and then you should be able to get your snap ring on, your circlip back on again. So that bit then is finished. So the only piece we've got to do now is to fit the spool up here, the part for the selector, and the 5th gear assembly. So I'm just going to get that to sit together and we'll come back. The next part we're going to fit on is the selector fork for the 5th gear. I'm going to try in these little slippers to make sure they're a nice snug fit. If in doubt, just replace them. They're really cheap, but 5th gear, well, it doesn't really wear out all that much. It's not too bad. So we're going to put those in to get started into the groove, just like Madonna. And then, wait a minute, I'm just going to put this here because I've got something important to tell you. We've put the little C-clip on here. This stops the shaft going too far. Now, this little shuttle, I did say at the very beginning that we should mark this with a Sharpie so we know which way it goes round. Or, alternatively, take a picture with your smartphone if you're not taking pictures of cats and things. So, why is it important? We've got 17.36 on one side and 20.62 on the other. So if you put it the wrong way around, it's not going to really work very well. So what we've got to do, we put our Sharpie mark on this side. We're going to just turn this around, put this in the slot, and then bring this up to go in the bottom of the slot. I hope you saw that. You see? So let's do that once more. We're going to push the shaft on, put the bobbin on, or slider, or whatever you want to call it, selector, push it on so the gap, the pin goes in the middle, and then bring up your 5th gear to go into the slot, or the tang here. Very important. Now you've got to put these little bolts back in. This is kind of tricky, but a bit boring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to struggle on with these for a little while, and then we'll see about building the oil pump up. And when it comes to little tight spaces, these things are an absolute dream, these ratchet spanners. I don't know how we managed without them before. They're absolutely brilliant to getting in tight spaces because, you know, they're a nice fine ratchet, so you can get into, you know, very tight spaces and ratchet things up. So I'm going to continue with this, and then we'll get on to assemble the end cover. Remember this bolt that was on the top? We couldn't find one. Well, it's only a grub screw, and it actually, well, it's supposed to be a grub screw, and I just put a temporary bolt in there, and it goes against the shoulder, so it can't go too far down, if you see what I mean. So all I did was, being a typical Yorkshireman, I just cut the top off the bolt and put a screwdriver slot in it, and now we're going to give it just a little tighten up, and then I'm going to get a punch, and punch just to one side of the thread, like that, both sides, and that's not going to come out. So that's nice. That didn't cost anything, did it? So, like I say, next thing, we're going to get to the casing. So the next thing to do, we've assembled the pump, we've blown everything out, and we're going to put it back on the thing. Now, a good way to remember which way it goes on, because it is a bit of a nightmare, it doesn't sort of want to go. This little nubbly bit goes to the bottom. So we put that on, press it down, we'll fit the bolts. I blew out the holes prior. If you probably was drinking beer or something like that and you missed that bit. Whenever you've got blind holes, like a hole in a casting, let me see, like this, look, for example, this is a blind hole. That means you can't see through the other side. These holes are through holes, if you see what I mean. They're tapped all the way through. But these are blind holes. Now, it's most important that you don't get dirt and debris in there, or any liquids like cleaning fluid, engine oil, grease, because when you tighten up the bolt, you can actually hydraulic the casting. It acts like a hydraulic jack, if you see what I mean. It's pushing and pushing and pushing, and that oil or whatever is in there has got nowhere to go except breaking the casting. It's very, very powerful stuff. So when you're doing little things like this, just blow out, get into the habit of blowing the holes out, because the last thing you want is to break a casting, because you've got to buy this and this. Wait a minute. You've got to buy this and this and this, all machined together. In other words, if you can't repair the casting, it's scrap. So I'm going to continue putting those bolts in, tighten them up, and then I'm going to get on to the bit that I don't like, and that is putting that end casing on. You will see why. So this is the bit that I don't like, and I'll explain why. Because we've got to get this square peg, this drive peg, to line up in the oil pump and in here. It can be quite tricky. So let's see what we can do. So first of all, again, a bit of oil, just to make sure everything's nice and lubed up. Can't get enough oil on stuff, because sometimes, you know, I lay gearboxes up for a long time. When I've got a bit of spare time and I've got a gearbox kicking about, I put some oil in, but you know, now and again I give them a shake up just to get the oil around, so they don't get rusty. And a lot of gearboxes corrode because of humidity. So what I'm going to do is take this peg. I've already pre-done my gasket, so I'll have to be a bit careful with that. Now in this casting here, this is where the gear goes. Just so we've got to line two up, and being square, it's kind of tricky. So what I do is I'm just going to turn that shaft a little bit. Just wait a minute, it's a bit tight. There we go. So I've just turned that shaft. There we go. So it's square, if you see what I mean. It's not at an angle. And then the same goes for this one here. I'm going to turn that one so it's square, so it gives us a fighting chance. Now, if you noticed on here, I've actually rounded the end a little bit so it goes on. I do that with all these drives. So this is how it comes usually. But I just give it a fighting chance to get in with a rounded square. So that goes on to the end like this. We're going to make sure that's on. We get our gasket, we work out which way it goes round. Now, which way does it go around? Looks like that way. I've got some Hylamar on there. I've shown you how to do that, there's no point doing it twice. And now, we've got to get that lined up. Just one thing I forgot very briefly. Where did I put it? Yeah, some Vaseline. Get some Vaseline out. Always get the Vaseline out. I'm going to put a smear of Vaseline inside here. And this will give those lips a little bit of a sealing chance to get lubed up, if you see what I mean. I'm not going to force any Vaseline down the hole. I'm just trying to put it on the outer lips there. So here we go. Oh, I hate this bit. So we very carefully line up the gearbox. Now before we put this back on, there is something crucial that we've got to get, and I'll go and get it now. Just before we put the gearbox on, we're going to tell you a little bit about this little, what would we call it, a fork? Remember when we took it off, we put a Sharpie mark on the side that the pin came out of. When we knocked the pin out, we put a little Sharpie mark on, so we knew that that went to this side. So what I've done is I've put the roll pin in. I've knocked the roll pin out all the way, and I've put it back in here to give it a fighting chance, because once it's in there we'll have a great difficulty trying to get the pin in order to get it to start. So I've got a punch which is the right size. Now there is a difference between these shafts here. Everybody thinks, oh, an LT77 Discos and Range Rovers and Defenders, there is a little bit of a difference sometimes in these shafts and this selector. And again, you can see now there's a rib across here, and that's why we had to take this piece off in order to strip the gearbox. You don't have to do that with the Discovery. So here we go. So I've got to line that up, line that pump up, all at the same time. So let's have a go. See if it's going to go. Oh, gee, mate. Is it down? Yeah. Whoa, 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 tiger. Oh, that tiger. So that's on. Oh, look at that. I think we got it first time. Look. Oh, what a... Aren't I an expert, eh? I'll be selling autographs next on eBay. So that's gone back in. So the next thing we're going to do is bolt all this housing down, put the bolts back in, torque them down, and then we're going to fit the collar. That's going to be fun. The next thing we're going to do is fit the collar. Now, I was chatting to a chap this morning, and I said that really you do need the tools to get this collar on and off. If there's anything, it's this thing that's the problem. Although it's got a groove in, you could pull it off with a puller. It's putting it back on again that's the problem. I suppose you could put a series of tubes and washers on the top edge of here. Let's see if we can get this a bit better. There, how's that? So we could put a nut on here and just progressively force it down. That's not a big deal, but anyway. So what I was going to say was I've lubed this up inside, and I put some lube around here. Now you'll see there's two rings on here. They used to have O-rings in for some reason. They're not in the kit. I don't know why they don't fit them anymore. But every time I've taken the gearbox apart, they've not been in. So why start a habit of a lifetime? So I'm going to get some oil around the oil seal. As you can see, we use a lot of oil. Get this square, and then just force that oil around those lips of that seal. We're going to screw this piece onto that shaft. Now, the socket size for this is 15/16. This is going to be really tricky, because I've got to get it started on the thread of the shaft. That seems to be going alright. Now, again, we're using this long bar because these are tight, and we're just going to progressively tighten that collar down. Now this might take a little while, so go and have a cup of tea and I'll have finished this off. Tea break's over. So, when you're getting down to the end, it will start to get very tight and then stop. Like that. The thing is, it's just exposing the ring so you can get the tool back in again, but so you know everything's all nice in line. But some people don't put those on too tight and they don't push it all the way down. It will come across a natural step in the shaft. So that's alright, that's all you need to do. So the next thing, we're going to take this off, pop it back on the bench, put the plugs in, put the cover on, push the pin in first of all, push the pin in, and then we're going to test it for pressure, make sure it's not going to leak. So with the gearbox on the bench, we're going to put this pin back in this hole, and I don't know if you can see that there's the hole. So we've got to sort of calculate where that is in the middle, and then we're going to tap it in. Once you've got the roll pin in, just make sure that you've got this shuttle in the right place, because they can, I bet I can't show you how to do it now. You need to move, oh wait a minute, that's it. So the shuttle here can go forwards, alright? Slide forward when you're banging it about and clattering it. Just push it forwards, turn it, turn this, so this is in the middle. So that's in neutral, alright? So you can see you can see probably the shuttle moving now, and that's driving that pin. So the next thing is we can put the cap on, the top on and the selector. We're going to put the drain bungs in and the filter, and again we're going to test it for pressure, because we like to test them just to make sure they're not going to leak. When we're putting the cover back on, we have to do something very important. This little roller here slips into this fork here, but also quite importantly, you can see there's another notch in here. Well, that's got to line up with that shuttle to keep it lined up. Now sometimes I have seen on i380s this bit come off. It is brazed in, and all it is a simple matter of picking it out the bottom of the box and putting it back in again, but it's really important to look at. Now again, usually when I do an exchange gearbox, they don't come with this on, we just put a cover on and that's it, so you've got to use your old one. But in this instance we're going to put the cover on so we can test the gears, because this is my last one I've got. I haven't got any more. Nobody was returning them, so they ended up with 2 and I ended up with nothing. Wait a minute, where's my oil can gone? Where's that gone? Just hold on a minute. Here it is. So we're going to give all these little pivots and things a good old lubing up on the shaft, and then we're going to line up the grooves, and hopefully, you'll notice there's some dowels. If the dowels are missing, you must put them back. There, that's in. So we're going to tighten this up and then we're going to test it. So I've got the cover on, and now I've put a gear shift on, and we're just going to quickly run through the gears to make sure everything's alright. Now don't worry if it doesn't go in to gear, if it's a bit notchy. You've got new synchros on there, the box is dry, it's got no oil in it, so I advise when you're looking for the gears, just turn the shaft a little bit so it's got a chance of locating. So first of all, this is going to be tricky for me because there's a spring bias on the top of here, and we have to work against that for first and second and reverse. But I'm not going to really go into this bit. I'm going to keep this bit for another video because this is dragging on for hours. So first of all, you're going to, in its natural position, the shifter is going to go into 3rd and 4th. Alright, that's going to go into 3rd and 4th. 5th is up and across. That's good. Bring it across for 1st. That's reverse. 1st. 2nd. Everything's fine. Good. I like that. But like I say, this is an old rusty top here. But it's advisable if you turn the shaft, honestly, because when the car's started up and you know your engine's running, and say for example you're in neutral or whatever, you're still going to get some drag through this shaft which is going to turn, and that will allow this gears to be selected quite easily. So don't worry about that. Like I say, we'll do this bit on another video, how to set this bit up. So the next thing, we're going to put the bungs in. Well, would you believe it? When I got the gasket set out, I couldn't see what was in the gasket, and you know I was mentioning there was a rubber O-ring that was supposed to go on the shaft. Well, it's here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it all off. I'll pull this piece off again and put this rubber ring on. I've never really seen them in a gasket set. Strange that. Anyway, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. There's one or two other things we have to do yet. So we've got to change the copper washer, and a good tip, if you saw one of my other videos, I'll do a sort of link up in the corner, where are you, up this way, about fake copper washers. Get a magnet, test it, make sure it's a real copper washer, not a fake one. There's so many about, it's unbelievable. So you're going to put your copper washer on. Now, they're not a very good idea, because look how loose they are. They're a horrible look, you know, they're really, really bad, but that's what you get. So with your fingers around the copper washer, just try and keep it centralised. You'll see what I mean, because it won't self-centre. You see? Yeah, that's better. Did I have a socket up here for that? Probably not. Next thing, the filter. I did have a brand new washer out for that, so where did I put that? Just a minute, I've lost the washer. Got the washer. There's no need to put real sealer on it, and you don't have to do a monster tight. So what I like to do is get the filter, push it into the housing first, and then put the nut on. The reason for that is that if you put the nut on, put it on like this and put the nut on, if it catches, these can crease, and then the filter's useless. So, you know, there's little habits that you get into, eh? Put the nut on, centralise it up, and then just give it a nip down. Because it is a paper washer, you don't want to go monster tight. For some reason, this was 15/16. And the drain bone is 32mm. So that's that tightened up. The next thing, we're going to pressure test it. Now, what we're going to do is going to use the old breather hose here, but it's got a kink in it, so we're going to fix that kink before we do anything else. I've just noticed the copper washer disappeared over there, so we're going to salvage that. But another thing that we've got to do, we've got to put a bolt in this top hole here. And why is that? Well, that's where your adjuster goes for your high and low and your diff lock and things like this, and air will come out of that when we test it. Repairing these hoses like this, it's got a kink in it, couldn't be easier. But the thing is, you might want to extend these breathers to make, how do we say, you know, to go inside your snorkel or make them extended, but the same technique applies. I actually did a video about this a long time ago, but I think people have forgotten about it. So what we're going to do first of all, put it in the vise and using your most rubbish knife you can find, because everyone's gone, cut the hose down the barb like that so it comes off. There we go, so that comes off like that. Pipe cutter, cut, nice and square. Now take one of these rubbish brick pipe makers and put it through the 3/16 hole. This is easy. I don't even bother with those clamps because they're a waste of time. Push it up a bit in your vise and then try and keep it parallel. Clamp it up. Next, get the fitting. There. 10mm bolt so you don't destroy the roundness, you know, so it doesn't collapse. Take a little hammer, put it on the pipe, hey presto, factory fitting. How easy was that? Did you like that? So I'm going to set up now to get the pressure tester working, and we can see how we do a smoke test on this box. So I've set up the smoke machine with a battery. Probably seen this video before. Yeah, sorry about all the shaking. I'm just doing this handheld. So what I'm going to do is simply I've attached the output of the smoke machine to the breather pipe. We're going to turn it on. I've already tested it once, but I want to show you something because we can't get it absolutely 100%. You'll see the manometer goes down as this is filling up with smoke and the pressure's building up inside the box, but as you can see it's not quite at the bottom, it's not stopping. So that means there's a leak. Now where is it? Well, I spotted it. It's here on the gasket. See? Just there. Everywhere else is fine. Nothing else, because I tested it with my water, and you can see it's just leaking out there. So that's not a great issue really, because I've put this gasket on. This was the old gasket, and I didn't put any Hylamar on it, so that just goes to show you that a little bit of sealer goes a long way. It just stops those little tiny leaks. I dare say it wouldn't leak oil out, because by the time oil got onto that gasket it would be fine. So I took the ring off again and fitted that little O-ring, which I didn't expect to be in there. The second groove here is for this snap ring. That's going to go in there, not unless I can't see that ring ever coming off. But anyway, I think that's let's turn this off. So I think that's about it. It's all built up and it's raring to go. We'll put some oil in it just to keep it ready, get it ready for going, and clean up this shaft as well. This here's got a bit rusty. I'll just run some sandpaper around that. The input shaft's nice, it's not loose at all. See, that's there's no free play in that, so that's good. Happy with that. So here we go. So if you like that, it was an epic, wasn't it? I mean, it was an absolute epic. But if you like that, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and forward this to your friends. They might learn something. I mean, this is a really good example of stripping and rebuilding an LT77. So we'll talk to you later, probably in the next video. While this gearbox is set up, I'll show you what's inside these bits and what to look for. But today, that's enough.